All right, let's travel back in time and find out where this all started. Let's talk about Bad Monkey Season 1, Episode 4. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass. I'm here to talk to you about Bad Monkey Season 1, Episode 4. Nothing's wrong with it, I just don't need it anymore, which is coming to Apple TV Plus on August 28, 2024. It is the fourth episode in this season, in the series even. I'm liking it a lot more. I like this series. I didn't love the first episode, but I thought it had potential, and it is showing that now. I really like this episode. I thought it was a really fantastic way to kind of like continue the big revelation from Episode 3. So, as you can imagine, my hot take is I definitely think you should watch it. It has been a good series so far, and I like this episode a lot. It gives us some more backstory, some new information, and an explosive ending. I really love the ending, so I'm excited to talk more about it and excited to see where this goes. So, all that being said, I'm going to tell you a little about the episode, a few things I like, a few things I didn't like, and then really quickly go into a recap. So, as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the recap section. If you don't know what happens in this episode, I would turn off when I get there. Before that, though, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler free. I'll let you know when I get to those spoilers. So, Bad Monkey Season 1, Episode 4 continues right after the big revelation from Episode 3, where we find out that this Christopher person, this Bahama developer who is killing people who seem to be related to this potential scam, is actually Nick. Nick, the father who is declared dead from this boating accident. They're one and the same. He shows up at Eve's house. Caitlin is there accusing her stepmom of killing her father, Nick. And Nick shows up, gives her a hug. She is relieved to see her father, and then we see that Nick has no left arm. So Christopher and Nick are one and the same. And then this episode smartly goes into a how did they get here, which is great. It gives you a lot more backstory, which I loved. It was a perfect time for it, perfect time for some more backstory. And so we learn more about where all these characters came from. So things I liked about this episode. The first, I like the backstory. I really liked going back and finding out more. I thought it was a right time to do it after we had this big revelation episode 3. Now you go back and see how we all got here. It was a really good way to like pepper that backstory in, but without having to have it at the very start. So I thought it was a very smart way to do it, and I liked everything that we learned. The second thing I liked, on top of the backstory, I like the way the story is going. I think it's progressing well. I think it's like giving us a lot of good information, and especially Yancey's storyline seems to be going well for him. I imagine that will turn very soon. And the third thing I loved, I liked the neighbor part here. I know I said I didn't like the neighbor, but here I liked it because they are actually antagonistic to each other. And it was a very short scene. It was somewhat funny, so I liked that part. And the last thing I love the ending. Another great explosive ending. Makes me want to watch episode 5, but I will hold out so I can do a review when that one comes out. But it is a really good ending. It makes me wonder what's going to happen next. So things I didn't love as much. The first, there's only one thing. There was almost no Neville. I mean, I like Neville. I like his character. We had a little bit of Bahamas scenes in this episode, but almost no Neville and no Driggs. So I miss them. I'm sure they'll be in future episodes. I'm sure Driggs will show up at least because the series is called Bad Monkey, and the poster has Vince Vaughn with the monkey. So I assume that they will meet up at some point. But that's my only little critique on this. So that is Bad Monkey Season 1, Episode 4. Like I said, definitely check it out. If you haven't gotten on this series, watch it now. It is pretty good. It's pretty entertaining, and it's only getting better. So I'm gonna really quickly go into a recap right now. So if you don't know what happened in this episode, I would turn it off now because there will be spoilers. We start with some backstory. 5 years ago, we see that Eve is an aspiring actor. She is trying to become an actor. She is apparently not great at it. One of the things that she can't do is cry on command. That is something that she is never able to do. We also see that Caitlin, Nick's daughter, is getting into modeling. Nick and Eve don't know each other, but separately we see that Nick is raising Caitlin, and she is getting into modeling. They go to a magazine launch party, and Nick was kind of left on his own. He was being a dad. Caitlin was 17. She wanted to like do her own thing. She went off to go hang out with her model friends. And that's when Nick recognized Eve. He hadn't met her before, but he recognized her from a car commercial. So he's staring at her. She comes up to him, says like, "Hey, I've had a crappy day. Like, stop staring at me." He's like, "Oh, I couldn't help it. I recognized you from that car commercial." And that was what Eve had been waiting for. She'd been waiting to be recognized, and they hit it off. A year later, they got married. Now, Nick and Izzy were already doing their medical scam. So they were already doing their like fraudulent orders of, I think, scooters, and then using that money to then like fund their lives. But because this is going so successful, they eventually take a trip to Andros, the Bahamas, and that is where Eve's ambition really kind of like digs in. She sees this place, and Nick is like, "Hey, we're doing well. Our business is doing well. Maybe we can get like a little bungalow here, and we can come here often." She's like, "A bungalow? Come on, you gotta think bigger. Let's have a resort." This causes Nick and Izzy to put more orders in, and this eventually leads to the DOJ getting involved, getting suspicious about the number of orders, and this causes some problems for Nick, Izzy, and Eve. Now, meanwhile, Yancy is a detective in Miami, and he makes a bust, just some sort of jewelry robbery, I think, but finds out later that Officer Mendez, remember that bald officer that he pulled the mailbox out of because he said that that guy was a dirty cop? Well, Officer Mendez was in charge of the Miami police tip line, and Yancey found out that Mendez paid for a tip for that bus that he did that Yancey never got. And he dug a little deeper, and it turns out that Mendez essentially paid like the husband of his cousin. So Yancey realizes that Mendez is like using the tip line to pay money to his friends for solved cases. And so Yancey gets mad at him. He approaches Mendez. He, tells him he knows what's going on. And then eventually Yancey calls and makes like an angry, flippant tip to the tip line, basically saying like, hey, I heard a tip that Officer Mendez is crooked and dirty, and he's, paying people off for tips. And, for this tip, you should give me $50,000. Well, Mendez uses this call to basically, make it seem like Yancey is blackmailing him. And so Yancey tries to explain, but it doesn't go well for either of them. Mendez gets thrown off the tip line, and we find out that he's not going to make detective for a few years. And Yancey gets transferred to the Keys for a host of reasons, mostly just kind of like being a pain in the ass. So after this, in the lobby, Mendez and Yancey get into a fight. And so during this fight, Mendez takes a picture of him, flipping him off. And he's like, I'm going to frame this in my office. They're like, okay, that's fine. Yancey goes to the Keys and he starts enjoying his time in the Keys. He starts to like get used to the life. And that's when he eventually meets Bonnie, which we all know where that went. We all know where Yancey and Bonnie's relationship went. We see the golf cart incident where Yancey forces Bonnie's husband's golf cart off the pier, which caused a lot of the other problems in Yancey's life. So moving on, now that the DOJ is interested in Nick and Izzy's business, Eve gets angry that they might lose it all. And so she makes Nick fix it. And so she wants, Nikki's like, oh, I could like, cut off some fingers and say there's a boating accident. He's like, you can't do that. Like, it's got to be more. And so eventually Nikki just says that he's going to cut off his arm. Izzy, the doctor, helps. He like preps the area. He helps, cut Nikki's arm off. And then after this, Izzy's like really shaken by this, but he has to do more because he's like, that's too clean of a cut. So he then has to like go take a propeller from a ship and like chop up the arm even more in the shower. That's why there were bone fragments. That's why there was blood in the shower. It's from Izzy doing that to make the arm look more authentic. He arranges the payment to Finney. He gives the arm to Finney. It doesn't explain the small shark teeth. They haven't explained that yet. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if that was just like, a fact that we're never going to get an explanation for, because Finney then took that arm, hooked it, and threw it overboard, in the fishing boat where it was eventually caught. So I don't know. Maybe he threw it over early, like when they were in shallow waters, and that's why maybe some shark teeth got in there, but we don't ever find out why. Christopher is now armless, and they're in the Bahamas, and he's using their savings and life insurance money to try to like start building the resort. He makes enemies with the Dragon Queen and Yaya. They basically like asking him about his arm, and he's like, go mind your own business. And Yaya essentially puts a curse on him. At this point, Christopher, or well, Nikki, but we'll call him Christopher because that's his persona now, is I was already employed Egg. Egg goes and like he tells Egg to like take care of these people while he like does something else. Egg goes up and he doesn't like threaten the Dragon Queen and Yaya, but he basically is like, he basically confronts them and they have kind of a standoff. So now that their whole plan is in motion, Eve gets concerned about Finney because Finney wants some more money. Finney got $3,000 to do the arm thing. Now he's asking for $500 more. And Christopher's like, I'll just pay him, like, whatever. And Eve is like, well, then he's going to ask for more, and eventually he might blackmail us more. So she convinces Christopher to kill him. Christopher can't really handle the guilt, but Eve is like, he's going to ruin our lives, essentially. And so Christopher kind of like comes through. But Izzy is concerned about a kid dying also. And so when Nick randomly visits Izzy, he tells him that like, oh, I'm about to talk to Yancey. Like I couldn't handle, or I couldn't like handle the guilt. Like I couldn't handle like a kid being killed. So I had to get it off my conscience. And he's like, I won't implicate you. I'll say it was all me. But Nikki knows what has to happen. And so eventually that is why Nikki then shot Izzy. and then left. It's actually a really, really sad scene. Like we see their friendship at the start. They seem to be really great friends. And then right before Nikki shoots Izzy, they do a call and response that they do regularly right before Nikki shoots Izzy. And Izzy seems to know what's going to happen, and he kind of accepts it. So that was a very sad scene. Now, remember, Yancey came right after Izzy was shot, and he was seen leaving the scene. So that's an important piece. Now, after, Nikki is like sitting in a parking lot after and just like so upset with everything they had to do. And Eve is trying to talk to him, and Nikki is like so upset that he basically like blurts out what happened. Unfortunately, someone overheard him, and that is when Eve takes action, and Eve kills her. This person is Heather from the weather. She overheard what Nikki said. Eve is like, "Oh, we were practicing a line. It was no big deal." And then she ends up shooting Heather from the weather. Now, we find out that Mendez seems to still be dirty or lazy, and he calls Yancey's partner, and he tells him that that kid that was shot, that Yancey saw, they solved it because there was a suicide, which is Izzy. Izzy's death was ruled a suicide, and they had a raincoat and the ballistics matched the Finney death. So they're saying that this doctor killed Finney and then was so distraught from like pushing pills that he shot himself. So the case closed. It was solved. Well, during this time, Nick is still laying low in Miami. He is reunited with Caitlin. They're, reconnecting, and they're all on the beach. And Eve suggests that maybe Caitlin might be a problem too. And Nick gets really upset with her. And he eventually says, like, no, like, I don't mean you to hurt him. I love Caitlin. It's like, she's my stepdaughter. And she finally cries on command. So this was interesting because like this was the first time Nikki pushed back on Eve for suggesting something. He's like, well, you're a monster. Like you want me to kill my own daughter? And it's the first time he actually seems to get upset with her. Maybe this will be the crack in their relationship that starts to form that maybe will cause some conflict down the line. We don't know. He believes her crying. He says, like, I misread that. I'm so sorry. But I think maybe this will lead to some problems down the line. Now, Rosa and Yancy are examining Izzy's body, and Rosa's like, there's no way this was suicide. It makes no sense. Like the exit wound or the entry wound was like behind his head. So he'd have to shoot himself like this, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So they're talking about this. They celebrate by having popsicles, and then they hook up in the morgue because Rosa likes Yancy. Yancy's a good guy, and so they finally hook up. Now, over at the Miami PD, some lady comes by to talk to Mendez about the Izzy murder, and she says that she saw someone. And Mendez doesn't want to deal with this. He's about to go to a game, but he talks to her anyways, and she eventually says, the person I saw was that person right there. And she points to the picture of Yancy flipping off Mendez that he has framed in his office. So there we go. There, that it might come back to bite Yancy. We'll see what happens. Yancy is unwinding at his own house after he throws some trash that the construction people left on his yard over in his neighbor's yard, and then that's when he and the real estate agent get angry at each other. They like yell at each other. It was nice. It was nice to see them finally be like actually antagonistic. But Yancey's unwinding at home after all of this, and he sees that deer that he saved earlier, the deer that was caught in the construction fence. They then had to take to a doctor. The doctor amputated that deer's leg, and so that deer was walking around with 3 legs. And he like draws a connection between that deer having 3 limbs and maybe Nick having 3 limbs after he cut off his own arm. And so he calls Rosa and says, like, hey, I have this crazy idea. Maybe Nick and Christopher are the same person. And so he talks to her, he leaves her a voicemail about this. Also says he enjoyed the sex, which was good. He probably should have led with that. He says that himself. But he calls her, he leaves her this message, and that is when, boom, he gets knocked out by Nikki. Nikki has tracked down Yancy, knocked him out, and that's the episode. What do we think is going to happen next? Well, I think that Nikki might kidnap Yancy. I don't know if they're going to be able to talk themselves out of it. Maybe Nikki's not going to be able to do it to Yancy because Yancy's a good person. Maybe he's going to be able to talk his way out of it. Maybe he's just going to be able to escape. Maybe Rosa's going to come by and save him. That might be possible because he was talking to Rosa. Maybe she's going to come by and save him. Maybe the neighbor's going to save him. I don't know. I mean, Yancey's obviously not going to die because this is an episode. This is a series. There are more episodes. So Yancey's not going to die. Somehow he's going to get out of this. We'll find out why. Somehow Neville's going to get involved too. Maybe Nikki's going to take Yancey back to the Bahamas and Neville's going to save him from there, or Driggs is going to save him from there. And also, I think that that maybe that distrust of Caitlin is going to probably drive a wedge between Nick and Eve down the line, and we'll see where that goes. So I assume all these bad acts will eventually weigh down on Nikki, and there will be some sort of wedge that happens between him and Eve. But We'll see what happens for later, but that is Bad Monkey season 1 episode 4. Like I said, definitely watch it. It's really good, it's really fun, and I really like the series so far. So definitely check it out. If you do watch it, let me know what you think. Let me know what you liked and didn't like. I would love to hear it. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.